You're sitting in a silent room, no phone, no distractions, just you and your breath. The clock ticks on the wall, but it doesn't feel like time is moving forward. It feels like it's collapsing inward. Suddenly an old memory surfaces, uninvited, irrelevant but sharp. Maybe it's the look someone gave you years ago that made you feel like nothing. Maybe it's the voice of your parent, your teacher, your lover, whispering a subtle cruelty you never questioned. You're not enough. You're too much. You'll never change. Why in this still moment does your mind betray you? Why does it pull you back into shame, fear, guilt? Scripts you never consciously chose yet repeat daily? You blink and you're back in your life. But it's not just a life, it's a loop. The same self-doubt before taking a risk. The same anger in traffic. The same voice in your head rehearsing worst-case scenarios like a religion. You think you're making decisions, but beneath your choices lie programs. Automatic responses etched deep into your nervous system, running silently, endlessly. Here's the paradox. You were born free, but now you're ruled by ghosts. Ghosts of words you absorbed before you knew how to reject them. Ghosts of reactions inherited from people who were just as trapped as you are now. Ghosts of a culture that taught you to perform instead of feel, obey instead of awaken. And what's worse, most of these ghosts speak in your own voice. How many of your preferences are actually protections? How much of your personality is just scar tissue? If someone were to strip away every conditioned belief you never questioned, what would be left? Who would you be without your fear? This isn't a metaphor. This isn't philosophy for philosophy's sake. It's a dagger pointed straight at the illusion you call your identity, because the truth is terrifying. You are programmed, and you don't even know the code. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. There are beliefs running your life that didn't come from you, but now live as you. Beliefs about your worth, your limits, your future. Some of them were installed by family, others by trauma. Some snuck in through repetition, songs, screens, conversations you thought you were ignoring, and now they've become architecture. Not just of your mind, but of your emotions, your relationships, your sense of time, your idea of God, your idea of love. Every time you sabotage something good, every time you downplay your success, every time you can't sleep because your thoughts won't stop attacking you. That's the program running. Here's the riddle. If you are not the voice in your head, then who is listening to it? And if that voice can be overwritten in just 7 minutes, why are you still suffering? Because you don't know the door is there. And even if you did, you wouldn't believe it's that easy to walk through, not after all this time, not after all the pain. But consider this. What if healing is not a process, but a choice repeated, with enough intensity to melt years of mental sediment in a flash? What if you don't need to fight your mind, but rewrite it like a script, line by line, emotion by emotion? What if the prison walls have been open all along, but your belief in them is the only thing keeping you inside? The great mystics weren't lying when they said liberation is sudden. The neuroscientists weren't wrong when they discovered the brain's plasticity. The sages, the saints, the scientists, they've all pointed to the same heresy. You can be free. And it doesn't have to take forever. But first, you must confront the lie you've believed your entire life. You didn't choose your first thoughts. You didn't design your fears. You didn't craft the stories you tell yourself in the dark. They were given to you. Inherited, absorbed, etched into your neural pathways before you knew how to resist. Somewhere along the line, you were programmed. Not with malicious intent, but through the machinery of survival, culture, and history. The hidden problem isn't simply that you carry wounds. It's that you've mistaken those wounds for your identity. But who did this, and why? To understand the architecture of these invisible programs, we must descend, not into conspiracy, but into the quiet corridors of the human psyche, where ancient thinkers have left us blueprints. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the repository of all the parts of ourselves we were taught to reject. Not just shame, but power. Not just fear, but instinct. The shadow isn't evil, it's simply disowned. And what's disowned controls you from behind the curtain. As Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is the hidden force, an unconscious inner architecture built from childhood pain, societal instruction, generational trauma, and the silent commandments of culture. The program doesn't live in your thoughts. It is your thoughts. The ones that say, "I'll never be good enough. People always leave. I have to earn love. If I rest, I'm worthless." But where did these commands originate? The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer described life as a ceaseless striving, driven by an unconscious will. He believed human beings are trapped in a cycle of desire and dissatisfaction, endlessly chasing relief, but never quite finding it. To Schopenhauer, this suffering wasn't a glitch. It was the default. And yet the problem deepens. What if that suffering becomes familiar, comfortable, even addictive? Psychologically, this is no mystery. The brain, as neuroscience reveals, is wired for familiarity. It prefers the known pain to the unknown freedom. If you were raised in emotional chaos, your nervous system may confuse intensity for intimacy. If you were rewarded only for achievement, your brain might equate love with productivity. These are not ideas. They are patterns etched into your neurobiology. And so the program embeds. It shows up in the person who overachieves to feel safe, in the one who sabotages love because safety feels suspicious, in the adult who becomes the very voice of the parent they once feared. And still, society applauds your mask. It rewards conformity and punishes deviation. It tells you to be yourself, but only if that self is efficient, attractive, agreeable. But what if you were never meant to fit in? What if normality is the disease, not the cure? Jean-Paul Sartre described the anguish of freedom, the terrifying realization that you are not defined by any essence, any program, unless you agree to be. This freedom is both gift and curse. To break from programming is to lose the comfort of certainty, because once you realize your suffering isn't fate, but a script, you can no longer blame the world. You must take the pen back. Viktor Frankl, writing from the belly of the Holocaust, discovered this truth in the midst of unimaginable horror. He saw that between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space is the power to choose, not just behavior, but meaning. This is where the rebellion begins. But we're not there. Yet, first you must recognize that the voice in your head, the one that critiques you, limits you, shames you, isn't yours. It was formed by countless unseen hands. The teacher who praised obedience over curiosity, the parent who loved conditionally, the media that sold you inadequacy, then sold you the cure, the culture that values appearance over truth, performance over authenticity. This is not paranoia. This is programming, and it is so effective because it operates beneath language. It lives in the body, in the muscles that tighten when you speak your truth, in the stomach that turns before you set a boundary, in the insomnia that arrives when you finally slow down and dare to listen. The hidden problem isn't just external. It's not just patriarchy or capitalism or trauma. It's how these forces live in you. Your triggers are maps. Your reactions are relics. Your inner critic is not the voice of reason. It's a relic of survival. You internalize the voices around you to feel safe. Now those voices won't let you rest. But here's the tragedy. The longer you obey them, the deeper they root. Because the brain, plastic and obedient, rewires according to repetition. And repetition is everywhere. The algorithm shows you more of what you already believe. Your nervous system fires the same pathways until they become roads. Even your friends may reinforce the illusion, calling it realism or humility when you self-deprecate. But beneath all of it, something in you knows this isn't the truth. This is training, and what is trained can be untrained. What is installed can be uninstalled. But first you must grieve, not for the loss of a person or a place, but for the years you lived under a spell, thinking it was your soul. Grieve the choices you didn't make because fear made them for you. Grieve the freedom you never claimed, because the cage was invisible. Because once you grieve it, you can name it. And once you name it, you can erase it. This is the storm before the stillness, the fracture before the light. You are not broken. You are simply buried, and now the deeper consequences begin to rise. How this programming has shaped not only your inner world, but the entire reality you move through. That you are broken. That change takes years. That suffering is noble. None. That is true. The only thing real is your willingness to remember who you were before the program began. So ask yourself, are you ready to meet the parts of you that never got to speak? Are you willing to dig beneath the story and feel what's real? Can you sit still long enough to hear the silence beneath the noise? Because if you can, then something ancient, something electric, something you is ready to return. But first, we must trace the roots of the program, into the shadows where it was born, into the philosophies and psychologies that shape the very idea of selfhood. What if your suffering isn't just pain? It's programming. Let's follow it to its source. You wake up, make coffee, scroll your feed. It all seems normal, routine. You go to work, you reply to emails, you laugh at something half funny just to keep the peace. You keep moving, you stay productive, and beneath it all, something aches. It's not a loud pain. It's not even sharp. It's something quieter, like the low hum of a machine running in the background. A dissonance you can't quite locate, but one you've carried so long it's become your baseline. You're normal. That hum is the sound of the program. But here's what no one tells you. The consequences of that programming don't just live in your mind. They leak into everything. Into the way you speak, the way you touch, the way you dream, or more often don't. Because if you've been programmed to believe you're unworthy, you'll subconsciously select relationships that reinforce it. If you've been taught that your value lies in achievement, you'll run yourself into the ground and call it ambition. If you've been told, directly or indirectly, that emotions are weakness, you'll numb the very parts of yourself designed to feel, and then wonder why life feels hollow. These aren't just psychological quirks. They are full-blown realities, constructed not from facts but from patterns. Let's dig deeper. From a neurological standpoint, every thought you repeat becomes a groove, a synaptic pathway strengthened by repetition. The more you think, "I'm not good enough," the easier it becomes to think it again. Your brain literally adapts to the frequency of your self-loathing. This is called Hebbian learning. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So imagine what happens when you fire the same self-limiting thoughts every day for 10, 20, 30 years. You don't just believe the thought, you become it, and it doesn't stop with thought. The body keeps score too. When shame becomes chronic, your posture collapses. Your shoulders curl inward, your breath shortens, your chest tightens. You don't just carry pain, you embody it. Over time, these somatic imprints harden into personality traits. You become the over-apologizer, the silent sufferer, the over-giver, the perfectionist. But these aren't just roles. They're survival adaptations etched into your muscles, your fascia, your vagus nerve. You call it your nature. But it's not nature. It's conditioning in costume. And here's the trick: society rewards the mask. If you're self-sacrificing, people call you noble. If you hustle endlessly, they call you strong. If you never show pain, they say you're resilient. But no one sees the price. A constant state of nervous system activation. A life measured in burnout and breakdowns. A quiet sense that something essential is missing. But you don't know what it is. Only that it used to be yours. The most dangerous programs are the ones that feel like virtues. Like the belief that you must earn rest. That your worth depends on being liked. That peace comes after the struggle, not before it. These hidden scripts dictate more than your habits. They shape your future. They define the jobs you think you deserve, the love you think you're allowed, the voice you believe you're permitted to raise. You don't need chains to be imprisoned. You just need a worldview narrow enough to hold you. And the worst part? You defend it. You argue for your limits. You justify your suffering. You say, "That's just how I am," when really it's just how you were taught to survive. But the cost of that survival, a self you've never fully met. Let's take it even further. There's a bias in your mind called confirmation bias, the tendency to notice, seek out, and remember information that confirms what you already believe. So if you believe you're unlovable, your brain will scan reality to find proof. Not because it's true, but because it's familiar. It's a filter so powerful that it distorts the very shape of the world. You could be standing in a room full of love and still feel alone. You could have all the resources you need and still feel stuck. Why? Because you're not seeing reality. You're seeing the program. The same happens at scale. Cultures are programmed. 2. A culture that values productivity over presence will shame stillness. A culture that prioritizes image over truth will mock authenticity. A culture that markets inadequacy to sell products will breed generations of people who never feel enough. And so we walk around with phones full of curated lives pretending we're connected, while loneliness becomes a silent epidemic. We compare ourselves to illusions and wonder why we feel like ghosts in our own skin. This isn't a personal failing. It's a system-level malfunction. And it survives because most people never stop long enough to see it. But once you do, once you truly see it, it changes everything. Suddenly you notice how quickly you abandon yourself in conversations. You realize how often your yes is really a "please don't leave me." You feel the tremble in your body before you speak. Your truth, and now you listen to it. You become dangerous to the program because now you're awake. Not just intellectually, but somatically, emotionally, spiritually. And in that awakening, there's a question you can no longer avoid. If all of this has been conditioning, then who were you before the world told you who to be? That's the question that begins the rebellion, the sacred heresy that threatens the entire illusion. You've seen the cost of staying asleep. Now you must decide what price you're willing to pay to wake up, because breaking the program will require discomfort, resistance, doubt. But beyond that resistance lies a freedom so profound it feels like returning to something you lost a long time ago. Something ancient, something wild, something you, but to reach it you must be willing to burn the script, to question everything you thought was just how things are. And that begins with a choice, radical, terrifying, and real: will. You reclaim the pen because now it's time to rebel. What if everything you thought was strength was actually submission? What if your discipline was just dressed up fear? What if your self-control was a form of self-abandonment? And what if the most radical act of power was remembering, not achieving, not winning, not overcoming, but remembering who you were before? The programming. This is where the rebellion begins, not with noise, but with stillness, not with fists clenched, but with fists unclenched. Imagine this. You stop. In the middle of a frantic day, a scroll, a thought loop, you simply stop. And instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of performing, you listen. Instead of running away from discomfort, you enter it. This is not weakness. This is war on the lie that you are a machine. You see, the rebellion against negative programming is not about positive thinking. That's just painting over rot. It's not about mantras or mood boards or high-vibe playlists. It's about confronting the very soil your identity grew from and choosing to plant something else. Here's the first truth of liberation. You are not your thoughts. Not a single one. You are the witness behind them, the stillness before them, the canvas, not the paint. This is where mindfulness, real mindfulness, not commodified, app-based mindfulness comes in. Because to break free, you must create a gap between stimulus and response, between programming and awareness. That gap is the seed of freedom, as Viktor Frankl said. In that space lies your power to choose. The second truth: you are not broken. You are conditioned. You were shaped by experiences you didn't consent to, shaped by voices you never questioned. And now you must become the sculptor, not the sculpture. But here's the paradox: to rewrite the program, you must stop fighting yourself. You cannot bully your way into freedom. You cannot shame yourself out of shame. The only force powerful enough to dissolve programming is radical self-compassion. That means seeing the inner critic not as an enemy, but as a scared protector, a ghost voice trying to keep you safe in outdated ways. A fragment of you frozen in time, still trying to earn the love it never got. What happens if you stop fighting it? What happens if instead you say, I see you, I know why you're here, but I don't need you to protect me like that anymore. Now, you're reparenting, rewiring. Now you're not a slave to the voice, you're its healer. And yes, this work is emotional, somatic, spiritual, but it is also concrete. Here are practices, tools, acts of rebellion. Name the program. Every time you hear that old voice, you'll never be good enough, don't argue with it. Just name it. That's the scarcity script. That's the abandonment loop. Naming creates distance, language gives shape, and what you can name, you can shift. Befriend the body. Your body holds the programming more deeply than your mind. Practice somatic presence, breathwork, movement, grounding, shaking, humming. Whatever reconnects you to the wisdom beneath words. You cannot think your way out of trauma. You have to feel your way through it. Interrupt the cycle. Catch the loop midstream. Pause. Breathe. Take a different action. If your instinct is to over-apologize, try saying nothing. If your instinct is to seek approval, try sitting in discomfort. If your instinct is to numb, try sitting still for 60 seconds and naming what you feel. These are micro-rebellions, but they add up. Neural plasticity is real. You can teach your brain a new song, create an inner sanctuary. In meditation, in journaling, or simply in your imagination, build a space where the old voices don't reach. A temple, a forest, a childhood bedroom. Let this be your rehearsal space for truth. A place where your authentic self is safe to speak, dream, rage, cry. Return to it often. It is not an escape. It's a reclamation. Speak forbidden truths. Tell the truth you've never said out loud, even just once. I'm tired of pretending. I don't want to be who they expect. I want to be free. You don't need. Say it in a whisper. Say it into your pillow. Say it in a journal. Words are spells. Speak yours. Practice reverse living. If you always say yes, say no. If you always stay quiet, speak up. If you always avoid risk, take one. Don't wait until you feel ready. You won't. That's the program talking. Do it scared. Each act of reverse living is an act of resurrection. And slowly something returns. Not a new self. Not a better self. But a truer self. One that remembers what joy felt like before it had to be earned. One that knows rest is not laziness, it's rebellion. One that does not apologize for existing outside the mold. That's the revolution. It's not loud. It doesn't march. It moves in silence, in breath, in choosing peace over performance. But let's be clear, this isn't easy. It's messy, uncomfortable, sometimes lonely. Because the moment you step out of the program, the world gets louder. People might call you selfish, lazy, dramatic. Why? Because your freedom threatens their conditioning. So you'll need courage, not the Hollywood kind. The quiet, sacred kind that shows up in whispers and small steps. And you'll need one more thing, faith. Not in a god, not in a guru, but in the still, trembling voice inside you that says, this isn't who I really am. Trust that voice, even when it shakes, even when it contradicts everything you've been taught, because that voice is your compass, your memory, the original signal beneath all the noise. Follow it long enough, and you'll discover that you were never broken, just buried, and now you are digging yourself out, not to become someone new, but to uncover who you always were. There comes a moment in every journey where the ground you've walked on begins to dissolve, not because it was false, but because it was temporary. A scaffolding, not a structure. A mask, not a face. And in that moment, stripped of the scripts, the borrowed beliefs, the inherited fears, you come face to face with a terrifying, liberating question. Who are you without the program? Not what do you do, not who do you serve, not what do you earn, but who are you in the silence after the story ends? There's a reason most people never reach this question. Because to answer it honestly, you must die before you die. Not physically, but psychologically. The ego, crafted to protect you, to win, to be admired, starts to panic. It says, if I don't hustle, I'll be forgotten. If I don't perform, I'll be unloved. If I don't belong, I'll be alone. And yet, what if your deepest fear isn't being unloved, but being seen as you truly are, without pretense, without armor, without achievement to justify your existence? That level of truth feels unbearable, because it is the truth that burns everything false, but it is also the truth that sets you free. And here it is. The ultimate realization. You were never the program. You were the witness of the program. You are the awareness behind it all. Timeless, untouched, whole. You are not the conditioned mind. You are the presence that sees the conditioning. You are not the painful thought. You are the field in which thought arises and dissolves. You are not broken. You are not missing anything. You are not behind. You are what has always been looking out from behind your eyes. The still point. The open sky. That is the final truth. And once you glimpse it, truly feel it, not just understand it intellectually, something shatters. Not you, not your sanity, but the illusion. The illusion that you must do something to be worthy. The illusion that love is conditional. The illusion that you must be more to be enough. You awaken from the dream of inadequacy. And in that awakening, you don't become passive. You become dangerous. Because nothing controls a person who no longer fears being themselves. You walk differently. Not with arrogance, but with rootedness. With the quiet confidence of someone who knows they belong, even in silence. And suddenly you see the world through new eyes. The pain of others no longer threatens you. It softens you. Their judgments don't define you. They reveal them. Your failures stop being proof of your unworthiness. They become portals to deeper wisdom. You no longer chase healing as a project to fix yourself. You live healing as a remembering. And here's the most shocking part. When you stop trying to prove your worth, your gifts begin to bloom. Not from pressure, not from scarcity, but from joy, from flow, from an inner freedom that cannot be bought or taught, only reclaimed. You start writing that book, not because it will make you valuable, but because you already are. You start speaking your truth, not because you want attention, but because silence hurts more than rejection. You begin to rest, not because you earned it, but because you exist. This is not self-improvement, it is self-remembrance. The child who danced without asking if they were good at it. The soul who dreamt without permission. The being who loved without calculation. They were never lost, only buried beneath layers of should. And now you've dug deep enough to find the diamond. But this is not the end. It is a beginning. Because to live from this space is not a one-time epiphany. It is a practice, a devotion, a return again and again to the truth that doesn't scream but whispers. You are already home. And in the quiet of that home, you remember what the program made you forget. That softness is strength. That surrender is power. That being, just being, is a miracle. The world will still try to sell you the old lie. That you're not enough. That you need more. That your value is out there waiting to be earned. But now you know better. You see through the advertising. You feel the hollowness in performance. You recognize programming when it speaks. And you no longer obey. You might still stumble, forget, fall back into old loops. That's okay, because now when you fall asleep, you know how to wake up. And that is what changes everything. The old self was programmed to survive. The awakened self is here to live, not to prove. Not to strive, not to pretend, but to live fully, freely, fiercely. So take this final truth and let it sink. Not into your mind, but into your marrow. You are not here to become something. You are here to remember you already are. The rest is just peeling away what was never yours. Let them call it delusion. Let them call it rebellion. Let them call it whatever they want. You'll call it liberation. And as you walk away from the cage, as you let the final illusion fall, as you take your first real breath as your actual self, you'll realize something strange. You never needed 7 minutes to erase the program. You just needed one true moment of remembering, and this was it.